and let us all do what we can to build a better future.
Something really cool happened yesterday. Our friends over at the Convo Couch, Mikasa Sukasa Network, asked me to join a panel of women entitled The Consciousness of COVID. And we began to talk about the global health pandemic and offer up some views. And what was interesting about it is we had a group of women who come from very different perspectives. I was introduced as a leftist, which of course is not really the case. I consider myself to be actually pretty conservative, at least on social issues. But I'm independent in other areas. I believe in the strong social safety net. But that's okay. That was cool. But we also had Olivia Rondeau, who is definitely very much a conservative. We had Sky Daddy, who was there. We had Fiorella, who is, from her perspective, we had very different opinions, different age groups, different backgrounds, and we sat down and we had a conversation. And it was remarkable. It was actually just quite remarkable that we were all able to talk about our concerns, our fears, how this global health crisis was managed and manipulated, ways in which it may be leveraged for certain political goals, and nobody raised their voice. Nobody insulted anybody else. We had a civil conversation. And it was really refreshing. And we had a civil conversation on social media, which in and of itself is very, very rare. You can find most of the discussion. It's linked in the show notes. There was also, we had to move over to Rockfin because there are certain topics that you're not really supposed to talk about on YouTube. Yeah.
Thank goodness for Rockfin. And we're also on Rockfin as well, so be sure to subscribe to us on Rockfin. But I did manage to catch a few minutes of that wonderful live stream that was being hosted on YouTube. First of all, I want to say Harlan's Media representing on the Convo Couch. There you go. Deep dish pizza's the best. There you go. But nonetheless, I think you did a fantastic job, not only representing yourself, Lainey, representing Harlan's Media, and you brought some very good points throughout the entire conversation. And I think we need to see more of that because, let's face it, I think there's a lot of people who like to sip the tea of infighting and people just yelling at each other, and I understand why, like for some, it's like, oh yeah, you got to hold this person accountable because they've been saying some BS stuff. And I think there's a lot of larger channels, TYT, for example, that have been really on the BS. Let's face it, voting Democrat and somehow assuming that it's just gonna work out in the long run. It just ain't gonna hunt. But nonetheless, I think you did a great job.
The only global statement I can make is that generalizations are never right.
One of the things that several people did reach out to me on Twitter, and people I did not know and were following each other, and I just, I had that sense that there was some real communication that had taken place between people. All of us perhaps have a slightly heterodox view. I think that many of us have very different perspectives, and we did probably manage things very differently when it came to our own behavior, but we also had some serious concerns in common. And to hear that and have that validated by people from different perspectives was just fantastic. So I first of all, I salute Convo Couch for putting that together. Craig and Pasta and Fiorello, thank you so much for putting that together. I'm sorry my camera kept glitching. We're going to check that out, and I won't do that to you in the future. But it was a good conversation. I think it was an important conversation to have. So I urge you all to check that out. Also, speaking of censorship, media, and everything else, one thing we know that's coming up right now is because of so many social media channels that are indiscriminately throwing creators off, with the fact that I do believe we're going to be seeing a lot of cyber warfare that could be nuking accounts, hacking accounts and websites. having media options is incredibly important. Many of you know I've been talking about World Perspectives Radio Chicago. That's our radio station. We broadcast 24/7 music, but now we are up to 2 weekly shows. And we now have, in addition to the 11 to 1 show Central Time on Saturdays, we now have a 2 to 4 show here in the studio. It's myself, and then with an hour later, you can come and check out what we're doing here on Civically Minded. But we've got some great news, because one of the things I've been doing is doing some experimentation, and we now have 2 options for listening to live streamed shows. So you can always tune into Live 365 or its app, and you will always be able to hear everything that's on World Perspectives Radio. But you have another option now, and that's Mixcloud. Mixcloud is a service that allows us to upload shows with music. They parse that out, and they get the royalties to the artist, which is what we want to do. And you can always check out our archives there. But when we go live broadcasting, when we don't have a pre-programmed show on the radio station, you can now tune in live. You can chat and send reactions and that. And Mixcloud, I think, has a slightly more stable platform and app. So if you're interested, download Mixcloud, sign up for an account. It's free. And favorite World Perspectives Radio Chicago, and you'll be able to find out when we're going live. So it's really cool that we now have 2 streaming platforms plus the option of archive shows.
And this is something we've been working on for a very long time. I remember, like, even back when Hard Lens was just an idea. I remember, Lainey, you're like, Daniel, we really should do a radio show. And look at this, it's happening. And I think we couldn't have timed it better with everything that's going on and all the threats that are happening with social media. It's a place where, as you pointed out, YouTube can, on fiat, just go, your channel no longer exists here. You actually have a process you can go through that happens with the government. And what's really ironic, on top of that, is we're now also working on getting a syndicated show on CAN TV. I can now say...
Actually, the update for that, Daniel, is that we do have a syndication where, like, we do have a few days when we are live on KTV.
But we're still waiting for that, like, set time where we can tell everyone to go on. But the point with that is, I've learned now, television is less conservative on what you can talk about than YouTube is at this point in time.
And that's true, yeah. And the thing is, we hope to get a terrestrial station, and that puts us under the FCC, and we have those protections. But even now, with what we're doing with Live 365, because these are smaller platforms, they're less likely to jump all over us. And in fact, various organizations, conservative organizations, for example, have been using radio for years, and we just don't kind of have that kind of hypersensitivity. So what we have is this option now, and if something were to happen, say, for example, YouTube were to give us strikes or something like that, you could go to the 99perspectives.tv page and check out all the platforms where we'd be streaming, and that could include World Perspectives Radio. So it offers us more options for keeping in touch with all of you. And it's a good thing, I think, at this point. Mm-hmm. And I would point out again, support, if to the extent that you can, right now with this conflict, support radio stations, particularly shortwave radio stations. A lot of them are clinging on with the tips of their fingers to be able to operate. But shortwave radio is the most reliable way to get media into war-torn countries where media is being taken down. It happened with Kashmir when they were having a conflict with India, where you had media blackouts. Shortwave stations were strengthening their signals so that people in Kashmir could get information. The same thing may very well be happening in the East right now, Ukraine and all those areas. So again, if you're thinking about this, do what you can. Look up some shortwave stations in your area. They're taking donations or contributions, or they're selling ad space. Check them out and support them, because they're going to be doing critical work at this time.
Mm-hmm. And by the way, again, Lainey, looking at the growth of World Perspectives Radio Chicago, it just reminds me of when we started off, and everyone who doesn't know or is going to find out, Heartlands Media, we started off on the radio, and it is wonderful to come back to something that we're familiar with, and I'm looking forward to seeing this network grow here at the 99 Perspective Studio, and I remember when we first moved in, how we were building up the radio station. Daniel and I were taking care of that, and it's very beautiful to look at, and I'm very excited about all the potential shows and programs that will be on World Perspectives Radio Chicago.
We got a new music guy in, Nick Doolin. He's a local guy. He's a barber. He's a hairdresser. But a music enthusiast, and he's putting together amazing playlists. He knows these tracks really deep. The really deep tracks. He's putting stuff in there that you're not hearing on the radio. So, or most places, but you're hearing them at World Perspectives Radio Chicago. We've also got a weekly wine show. We just started today, which is about Chicago, the Chicago wine scene, and we're just getting started. So excited, and if some of you are coming to our next open house, love to talk with you about what's going on there. But now we need to move on